Hello and welcome to another episode of the Podium Podcast. I'm Simon Hartley,
And my name's Tom May.
and over the years I have heard hundreds, if not thousands, of people talking about the power of applying an elite sports mindset into business. And I think it's a genuinely fantastic concept, but my question is how? How do you apply an elite sport mindset into business? During the course of the next few shows, we will be exploring this by talking to athletes who have literally taken their own performance mindset and are applying it into a business context. We want to know what works and what doesn't. And we're joined today by a fantastic guest, former Premier League football and Newcastle United legend, Robbie Elliott. How are you, Robbie? Welcome to the show.
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Now, I've described that you obviously played for Newcastle United. That wasn't your only club. Tell us a little bit about your playing career.
Yeah, so I started off at Newcastle, made my debut age 17, and then over my career did 12 years at Newcastle, but also did 4 at Bolton. I did a short spell at Leeds and Sunderland and ended at Hartlepool.
Fantastic. And I mean, there must have been some highs and some lows in that. First of all, what were the highlights?
Obviously playing for your hometown club, I think the era I was fortunate to play in was, we still talk about it now, which is crazy, the entertainment. I think the lows, as Tom will allude to, is obviously injuries and that side of it. That's something that really is a hard time. But I think we'll get there in this conversation. But I use that as my light bulb moment, and literally that's where my life changed as a player into what I was going to do post career.
I think those challenges are there for everybody. There are so many as you go through the career. Injury is a huge one. So, how did it challenge you as a player at the time?
So my first big injury was my ACL. I did it when I was 17. Way back in the day when again there was only a physio, so I was shipped off to Lilleshall, which was the FA rehab centre. So as a young lad, just being there, being around senior players like the Richard Goffs, the John Barnes, and people from different teams and different sports, and just really growing up. I mean, you really had to do that. You're on your own. But the big one that made the change in my life was at Bolton. So I left Newcastle 23, went to Bolton, uh, biggest signing in the history of Bolton. Made my debut at the home game. So it was when Lady died. So all the Premier League games got cancelled over the weekend. We were the Monday night Sky game. Bolton wanted to go ahead to show this new stadium, and I broke my leg in 3 places during that game. So horrendous injury. So tib fib with a spiral fracture. So I was obviously in hospital for, I want to say, maybe 6 weeks. And my first day back at Bolton, hobbled in with my crutches, said to the physio, "What am I doing today?" And he said, "I'm getting these two fit for the weekend. You get yourself to the gym." So I
Wow.
made my way to the gym and realized that, okay, I'm going to be here for a long time. It's not a short term injury. This is something I really need to take seriously. So as Tom knows, we used to work with Blackie a lot back in the day when I was at Newcastle. Reach out to him, reach out to a couple of other people for advice, and literally ended up going back to university. So I went to university to understand sports performance, um, and did a course at Preston. So literally what I was learning at Preston, I was then applying to myself in the gym. I really enjoyed it. I did my coaching badges around the same time and did not enjoy that one bit. I think I was too early in my career for it. So made that decision pretty early that that wasn't the route for me. When I then ended up coming back to Newcastle under Sir Bobby, I got on very well with the fitness coach, Paul Winsper, and he encouraged me to go back to university. So I did my sports science degree part time at Northumbria. Um, Lectures in the morning, train, go back to lectures, then work at the academy at night time. So that's when I realised that that was going to be the follow up to my career.
Was
When
there
you
a
were
point?
stuck in hospital for that long, sorry, Simon. What sort of things were running through your head? Are you thinking that could be career over, or did you know you were always going to get back from it?
So again, I'm very mentally strong and very stubborn. So I never once I think it was going to be a career ending. I think my ACL sort of made me feel a little bit bulletproof because I was one of the first to have the patellar tendon operation, whereas there must have been 10 other people at Lilleshall who had the hamstring graft, and they never
Mm.
made it into professional sport. They had to retire at a young age. So I have a lot to thank Dr. Beveridge for at Newcastle, who did that surgery. But the broken leg, it was a bad one. But again, you never think that's going to be a career ending. But it did make you realise that it could end at any moment.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting that not as well as not thinking of it as a career-ending injury, you also use that time to go and find out, learn sports science, learn a bit about performance and physical performance, so that you could first of all heal yourself. But uh, am I right in thinking that you also used that as you started transitioning out of sport, and that you went into strength and conditioning initially?
Yeah. So near the end of my career, again, I could have gone on a couple more years. Mentally, I was basically getting to the end, but physically, I know I could have done a couple more. But the opportunity came at Newcastle, so I would go when I was at Hartlepool. Danny Wilson would allow me to go to Newcastle 2 days a week to learn my trade. So at first it was under Sam Allardyce, and then it was
Mm.
Kevin. So I'd just go in and shadow all the staff. Really enjoyed it. And then as I was coming out that end of my contract at Hartlepool, the position opened up at Newcastle for the reserves to be the performance coach. And again, I knew that was going to be my future. I could have done another couple of years, but it wouldn't have made sense to miss that opportunity because they don't come up very often.
Absolutely. I mean, I can remember kind of doing what I call an apprenticeship now, when I was sort of coming out of university and just going and getting that experience. I actually heard a friend of mine who's a Michelin star chef describe it as being a sponge, just go in and soak everything up and be interested and curious. Um, is that how you kind of find yourself when you were sort of the other side of playing and in the on the support staff rather than on the playing staff?
Definitely. I mean, being the sponge, but also applying it in the academy system. So I would go to night times and work with the young players. And again, the number of people who do the coaching badges but don't put in the hours. And then when it comes to actually training sessions and things are going wrong, they don't know how to cope. So again, it was like serving the apprenticeship, and it's something I thoroughly enjoyed. And again, I wouldn't have continued with it if I didn't. So yeah, it was a really interesting time and one I'm really thankful for.
How open were those people to helping you um, I guess as a former player? Maybe they were a bit more open. I know, some teams and some clubs can be quite cagey about, I guess, sort of opening the lid on all their secrets. But were they very sort of forward thinking in terms of, they knew that they were opening up you an opportunity to you as an individual?
Yeah, for sure. So under Sam, I played under Sam at Bolton, and we had a very good relationship.
Okay.
It's funny he gets such a bad rep, but he was the first to try literally everything, and he was willing to try anything, be it technology, be it psychology, be it nutrition. If it didn't work, fine, we'll move on to the next one. So when Sam opened the door to me, I already knew some of the staff um, from his Bolton days, but also from the Newcastle days. And again, it was open access, which you don't normally get. Like you say, Tom, it was very surprising that they gave it to me as I was still playing. But then Kevin did exactly the same. The fact that he knew me from my previous days at the club. So again, very fortunate to have those opportunities.
I mean, you've now moved across to North America and done a real eclectic mix of things. I mean, some of it around sort of physical performance, but you've certainly kind of moved on into other areas of business now. What do you take from your performance mindset and now use in business? And how does that help you with the challenges that you come across on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, sports got me to where I am now. So when I was at Newcastle, I got headhunted by Nike and US Soccer to be the first youth performance coach for the national teams, which is when I transitioned over to Nike. Um, I probably did it 3 years remotely and then moved to Portland to WHQ, which again is just a mind blowing campus. There's like 15,000 people on there, and it's every day is different. You're learning different skill sets. It's a matrix over there that is very hard to understand. But once you're in that mix, there's no end to opportunities. So I moved into Spark, which was a performance arm of Nike. Did that for 4 years, then transitioned into global football innovation. So that was working on the football boots each World Cup cycle. So basically, how the sport's changing, how you can affect performance. And then my last 5 years were in the Nike Research Lab. So understanding the demands of sport, capabilities of athletes, and telling Nike how sport's changing. And it was as cool as what it sounded. So you're working with the elite of the elite, any
Mm.
Nike athlete, any Nike federation, and just being able to go multi-sport, it was massively eye-opening as well. And again, it just opened up that new world to me. The niche was football, obviously, but again, within Nike, there's so many different sports and opportunities. It really set me up. The interesting bit is going from professional sport into business, and also a business in the US. The HR, the way they deal with people is a different world altogether. I was very lucky. I had a lot of English counterparts at the same time, so it wasn't too much of a culture shock. But it definitely, you have to be careful.
Was that intimidating going into a company like Nike, where I guess you're going into one of the biggest corporate beasts on the planet? Still a pretty cool corporate beast, but even still, you're going in there as someone that's come out of football. And were you chucked in at the deep end, or?
I think I don't think I realised the vast size of it until I actually got there. We obviously had the small office in Doxford Park where I'd go down and work every now and again and meet people. But unfortunately enough, I had a really good network within the company already. And bizarrely, there's a lot of Geordies in VP positions because obviously they used to have the Washington office, which was a big one. Then that downsized, went to Amsterdam, and everyone ended up in Portland. So there's always that friendly accent, which helps. And I never, I'm very English. I never self promote, which isn't a very American thing within Nike. But when I look back, there was no one in the company with my skill set of being a professional for 17 years, having a sports science degree, so know the physical side of it, the mental side, and actually work within the company. So it's that itself stood me a little bit apart from others, which obviously helped.
What I mean, anything like that is going to be a massive learning curve. What were the skills that you found you had to learn sort of most quickly or develop most quickly?
Email. I mean, it truly is. I mean, organizations like that, everything's based on that type of communication. Whereas I would stand out literally because I would walk across campus, and campus is big, but I'd walk from my office to the other office to have a conversation with someone, and like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I don't just want to send an email. I want to actually meet you and talk." And that was really eye opening that people didn't expect that. So that side of it, I try and do everything personal. Having me behind the desk is a waste of everyone's time. I become very frustrated. It's not my habitat, so to speak. So being out, meeting people, traveling, communicating, and I think we've all been in dress rooms where you have different cultures, different players, different mentalities. You don't necessarily have to be best friends with everyone, but you have to respect them in the position. And I think taking that from sport into business, and honestly, Tom will know yourself, within those dress rooms, you can understand people very quickly. It doesn't take long to understand within sport who's a chancer, who's not, the type of mentalities, and it's the same in business. And you can filter a lot of the rubbish out very quickly, which obviously helps.
Yeah, I think you come to be quite a good judge of character when you're in a fairly eclectic changing room, as every changing room is. But I think I'm trying to find a way around saying it without swearing, but there's a certain amount of bullshit filtering that goes on, which you can take into your new role, your new life, which actually puts you in a pretty good position when it comes to judging characters and people like that. I think sport's very good at doing that, and I think it's quite interesting what you said about meeting people face to face. I think, especially since the pandemic, there's such a drive to do everything virtually, which I can understand from a perspective if it's first up meeting and you're not quite sure if there's an opportunity. Find out where there's an opportunity, then go and meet someone face to face. Developing that relationship is so key to getting anything done in life, I think. And at times it's sort of forgotten, I think, in the current business climate. Whereas actually, to develop good projects, to develop good teams, it all comes back to building teams within sport, right? It's building the trust, all the elements of that you need within a team, within those people around you. I think what you were clearly demonstrating there was what you'd learned when you were playing football.
Yeah, I mean, the last few years has just made me realise even more so. It's about relationships and trust in your network. And in some respect, COVID was. It sounds really bad, but in a business way, I was able to make my circle smaller but tighter. If that makes sense, because you didn't have to take every meeting, every call, and you can really figure out who you wanted to work with going forward. I think what you just said there about the bullshit meter, that was one of my roles within Nike and innovation, was understanding, yes, you have to innovate, you have to think, but also what is practically going to happen in the sport. And we have people who think totally outside the box, which you have to, because for innovation, you have to do that. But also you have to realize what is going to be applicable.
Some things will never fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, good ones, yeah.
Yeah. The last couple of roles that you've had have been senior leadership, and not necessarily in that same field, not in direct sort of performance or strength and conditioning, but you're a vice president, you're a CEO now. In terms of business leadership, what have you taken out? I mean, I know the strength of relationships and understanding those, but is there anything else that you really apply now as a senior leader?
I think honesty. I think that's top and bottom. You have to be honest with everyone. You don't waste people's time, and if something's not going to happen, then be upfront. I more appreciate someone saying no, this isn't going to happen, than being strung along for 4 weeks. And again, one of the things within Nike was, if someone was doing a project that wasn't right, they couldn't tell you straight outright that you're doing something wrong. They'd have to position it where, have you thought about doing it this way? And for me, that's not how we work. As a professional athlete, if you're doing something wrong, tell me, and then I can get better, change, and then we're all on the same page. So again, it's full transparency and honesty, I think, is something that is somewhat lost within the world of the business and corporate side of it.
I think there's an element of fear of it, of people think you're being personal about it. I know people, currently that I mean, you can see the sort of hairs on the back of their neck standing up, like they can't take the criticism, they don't like it.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit like you. Like it can be uncomfortable at times. But if you're ever going to get better at something, you need to be shown where you're going wrong, and it's that ability to accept critique when it's in a constructive format. Because let's face it, there are people out there that quite frankly just tear you down, but don't give you any constructive build up or pathway forward. I think it's really important to take that into the new careers that athletes take, because it's a really strong, I think, trait to have, that ability to accept that and move on.
Yeah. Well, yourself, within the dressing room, there's some people who need a rocket, there's some people who need an arm behind the back, there's others that, if you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, you shouldn't get involved anyway. So it's understanding who you work with as well and what drives them, but also be very personal. I mean, I learned that from some of my managers, that small things go a long, long way. Remembering even people's names, kids' names. Remember speaking to everyone in the facility, not just the big names. So there's so many little things that you pick up throughout your career that should become normal, but they're so not, and that's why it's a little bit sad in a way.
It's one of the things that I was really interested in asking you, because, like you said, you've worked with some fantastic coaches over the years, some fantastic managers, and I'm sure you'll have learned a lot about not necessarily management in football, but just how to work with human beings from them, from the likes of Sir Bobby and Sam and people like that. What particularly, I know, I mean, I was hugely inspired by Blackie, as I know Tom was. What did you take from them particularly?
Be a good person. I mean, and again, when you're a player, nobody wants to have a bad day. Nobody wants to be injured. But sometimes when you're injured, you were seen as the leper in the corner, and nobody wanted to speak to you until you were fit again when you were used to them. For me, in a lot of the so in some of the sports marketing roles, when we're looking at connecting with teams and athletes, I always go to the injured players because one, they always need the love, but also they're the ones who are willing to try things out to get fit again. And when we've won a game, everyone's always on the phone saying congrats. Very few people reach out to you when either you've had a bad game or you're injured or that side of it. And that's where I think there's a huge opportunity to people just be more personal. It's that's how you're going to build relationships, but it has to be honestly and organic as well. You can't force these things.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've come across in business that you would say you were completely unprepared for, or that took you so far outside of your comfort zone? It almost like if you hadn't had an athletic career, it wouldn't have made any difference, if you know what I mean.
Um, Not that springs to mind, because again, it sounds funny, but being a football player, you've always got that conversation. There's always something to talk about. Being if they like football, or not even football, but if they like sport, you've always got something to talk about. And the world is so small nowadays. There's generally a link to someone that you know, and I would always do that before meeting anyway. I would figure out someone who knew the person I'm meeting or a story about them just to break that ice and start the conversation. But yeah, I try and avoid anything that makes me uncomfortable. I'm quite good at that, and I know what I don't want to do. So if I don't have to do it, I will try and figure that out and go a different route.
Brilliant. Is Conversely, is there anything that you've learned from being in business that, if you could, you'd sort of import back into your life as an athlete, or if you were working with athletes now, you'd use as part of your work with them?
Yeah, I think that there's so many people chasing the 1% and 2% nowadays, like the bells and whistles as we call it, but without the foundation. And again, the building blocks are there. It's human nature. It's nutrition. It's sleep. It's recovery. It's wellness. And without that, you shouldn't really be adding the layers on top because you're going to break. So I'm still learning every day, working with some of the greatest minds in sport and NASA and things like that, where there's so much that you can actually help athletes with. The problem you have now is one, they get paid so much and they're so
Mm.
good at what they do. It's very hard to explain. I was talking to an NBA player not long back and trying to get him to change his diet. And he said, well, I'm shooting 3 points. I'm winning the NBA. He said, what difference is that going to make to me? How is it going to make me play better? So you then have to shoot it down and say, well, look, this is about longevity. You might get another 2, 3 years out of your career if you start
Yeah, yeah.
at a young age. And then you start doing the numbers and saying how much that might be worth to them. And then it's like, okay, I might listen now. But when you're trying to talk performance with the elite, it's very hard to get them to understand what it can do to just shift that balance and make them even better.
I
Too
think
much
that,
cash in the bank.
yeah, I think it's really interesting that I actually don't think that many people or organisations really understand what drives their performance. So I think they've got metrics, I think they've got KPIs, they've got all of that stuff in place, and some of them are obsessing about that kind of 0.01% stuff. but they don't really understand what the 50% is. And they're looking for those subtle nuances without getting the basics right.
100%. It's not sexy. That's the thing. That the building blocks on things are going to make it exciting. But again, there's so much data within sport now. It's overkill. I mean, people are collecting data, but there's too much to even make it actionable. There's no value in collecting the data. They haven't got time to spin it around to make a difference. To It's all retrospective, but they're looking at. So yeah, I mean, there's huge opportunities there for teams that can be efficient. And again, working across multi sports and in different countries, there's only two or three teams, and it's quite obvious to see who they are, who are actually doing it right behind the scenes. The rest is like they're really struggling, to be honest.
And even recognizing, the power of uh, players enjoying being in the environment and having fun. That's not something that's easy to apply a metric to or a KPI or to count or measure in any way. But it can be super, super important, possibly more important than whether we eat lettuce or cabbage or, whatever today. So, so yeah, I think you're right. Understanding what really, really drives a performance is probably understood. Kind of not well enough understood in by most leaders and most organisations. The last kind of question I've got for you: if you were to almost kind of give yourself some advice as a player now, knowing what you know, or for others who are transitioning into the world of business, what would you advise them?
I mean, for me, I was lucky. I had some very good mentors, so to speak. Even within Nike, when I worked there, I would always recommend having two or three mentors in different positions to really reach out to and speak with. Again, there's some very good people out there. You need to find them, and which ones fit what you're trying to do. So, what are you trying to aspire to be or want to be? And again, I've been very lucky in my network that I've had some very, very good mentors and still do. Um, just going back to your last point about the dressing room, the culture is one of the biggest drivers as well of a successful team. You have to have the right people within that dressing room, and everyone has their role, but they also have to be compatible, and that's a skill within a club to get that right skill set and group together. I'm sure Tom will say the same. I only look back when people say what was the best time. It was always the successful times were the best dressing rooms. I was in some dressing rooms which had amazing talent, but they weren't successful, and it just shows that it all goes together. They go hand in hand, the dressing room and the performance.
Very true. Very true. You see all these teams that have stellar players. You just can't blend them all together. You've got too many egos, whatever it might be. I think maybe some of the team sports where you have individual performances like cricket, you see some of those outliers that do you have them in a team? Do you not have them in a team? And it's a balance of that, isn't it? That's key to have.
Yeah, I had some players in Newcastle, and the amount of crap that would go on through the week. But then Sir Bobby would say, "Look, if he's getting us the 3 points on Saturday, I can deal with that. Don't worry about it. Let me deal with it." And again, that's the beauty of who is running the show. Basically, if they can control
Yeah,
the players and get the best out of them, because you do need to have those odd mavericks within there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's one of those really commonly used phrases, get the best from everybody. Great leaders get the best from everybody, but it's incredibly rare that leaders actually get the best from everybody. I think it takes a really, really talented leader to understand people in enough depth to get the best from them, especially when you've got a really, really diverse group. Cool.
And only you have them maybe 2 or 3 days, 3 hours of the day.
Yeah.
It's You have
Yeah.
to have those personalities that live their life as an elite athlete, and again, that is hard to find.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like you say, the wind's not always going to be behind you, either. To do that when the wind's against you, I think is a real skill. Cool, Tom. You have some quick fire questions, my friend.
Yes. Yes, Robbie, if you hadn't been a professional athlete, what would you have been? And is there another vocation that took your interest?
So when I actually made my debut at 17, I was still doing a A level in graphic design at Gosford High School. So I used to love graphic design. So it would either have been that, or I actually sports photography would be something that, again, it would
Yeah,
have to be involved with sport and get me a free ticket to all the. I,
love it.
I think sport photography is a really interesting profession.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. Who's the person you admire most in sport and in business?
Um, it'd be hard to nail it to one person, but literally anyone that's made it to the top, because they've gone through so much to get there. And again, any sport. So I've met some Olympians and big surfers and snowboarders and mountain bikers. They don't do it for the money. They
No.
do make money from it. Obviously, people want to have money and fame and that, but these people are the ones who the drive is just incredible to get to where they've got without earning the money. They're the ones I really look at as being influential.
So let's imagine you borrowed some money off your NBA star that's got a load of cash. What would you invest that money in?
I would keep it under my bed. I am of the era of the worst recommendations on investments.
Right.
And again, it's a horrific time that I was in, because you're naive, you trust people, you think people are doing everything for the right reason, and I mean, you don't have to go
Yeah.
far to realize how bad of a situation a lot of my teammates and friends got in, because again, trust.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. You can only watch one film for the rest of your life. Now, the first half of this question is really testing a lot of people because they're like, I can't do that. But you're going to have to watch it. What would it be?
Okay, so I'm going to split into two. So if I'm in a good mood,
Okay.
Yes, like it.
and then if it was more of a I don't know, a different type of day, Gladiator.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Get your
Two good
juices
ones.
flowing.
I mean,
That's based on you being a grumpy sod for the rest of your life, or or a happy man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's amazing in America is no matter what time of day you switch the telly on, there's movies. So it could be like 7 in the morning, Gladiators on, or Top Gun, or it just it's amazing. It can destroy
Yeah,
you
yeah.
for sure, but yeah.
As
So
you,
Yeah,
as you
keep
watch
that off. Brilliant. Top man.
you watch Gladiator and then hack your breakfast to bits aggressively.
Yeah, my
Sausage,
first couple of
sausages
weeks.
are absolutely terrifying yourself.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Top man.
There's another question that's popped into my head that I'd love to ask before we wrap up. So obviously you've met loads of great athletes from a huge, diverse range of sports. Do you see characteristics in them that allow them to be successful in that sport, but also in the rest of their life?
Yeah, I mean, you do see some athletes, and you can see very quickly that they're business savvy and have a future away from the game. There's others that purely sport, or their one sport is all they have. And again, I look back at some of my teammates, and the reason why I say my injury was my light bulb, it was also a time for me to take a step away. A lot of my teammates were just going from Saturday to Saturday to Saturday, and then all of a sudden your career's gone, and it's like, oh, what do I do now? And that's why they're not set up to work in anything else apart from that sport, be it coaching or media. And it's so cliche, but it really is. Without that opportunity to take a step back, and the number of players I've spoken to in sport and said the best thing that happened was that injury. Obviously, not a career-threatening injury, but a one to give you that pause in your life just to realise you go from age 16 professionally just playing. And if you don't have that break, then you really don't have a chance to understand what is out there. The other thing that opened my eyes with Nike is you don't just have to be a coach or a manager or a media. There's so many ways of staying connected to sport, be it designing boots, be it the engineering side, be it sports marketing, be it branding. There's so many different ways you can be connected into sport that people never really thought about back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely, and I suspect you're right. You know, those people who have managed to kind of flex their muscles in more than one way. You know, they haven't been wholly, sort of single-mindedly, almost blinkered on their sport, but have given themselves a little bit of a broader perspective on life and tested themselves in a few more ways. Set themselves really, really well. Set themselves up really well for transition into something else. Brilliant, great stuff.
I was just going to say a lot of it is also when people travel with sport. Again, if you travel and go to a different country and different cultures, but also there's a lot of US sports players now getting into startups and investing in that, and then that becomes their their sort of side project. So when they're not training, they've got something to focus on. They can learn a new business, and again, there's so many interesting ways of spending your time because we have a lot of time, or athletes have a lot of time on their hands. It's how you use that to better your life.
Yeah, yeah, and there's like you say, huge opportunities, and I think that's a brilliant lesson for people, whatever walk of life they're in. Not just athletes who might transition, but anybody in any walk of life. Fantastic. Tom, thank you very much. Robbie, thank you very, very much. Wonderful conversation. Loads of fantastic insights in there. So, yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Guys, we look forward to checking in with you again very soon on the next episode of the Podium Podcast. Take care.